My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called Fate, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your fate. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of Fate. How's everybody doing today? On today's show, I have Carole Obley. She is a psychic medium. She's an author. She has a new book out called The Art of Sensing, a guide for staying true to your soul's journey through challenging times. And we are in some challenging times, ladies and gentlemen. So love that Carole is with us today. Carole, welcome to your fate, my friend. How you doing today?
Thanks so much for having me, Christy.
Thank you for coming on and spending your time with me. I read your book. I really enjoyed it. I'm super happy to have you here to share your story with my audience. And I always like to start at the very beginning. Why don't you tell us about your spiritual awakening, your spiritual journey? How did you become the powerful psychic medium that you are today?
Well, thank you. Many years. Mediumship is not something that certainly is developed overnight. It takes many years of practice and for the attunement to occur between the vessel, the medium for that, and the spirit world. And importantly, with the spirit controls or spirit guides. So this journey for me, as far as mediumship is concerned, began almost 30 years ago. And I've given, I don't know, I have on my website 15,000 readings. I think it's probably more than that. But suffice it to say, it's been thousands of readings. The awakening began as many people who, are doing spiritual work nowadays. And it was through some kind of harrowing experiences. The first one being uh, drug and alcohol addiction, particularly alcohol. And I had a very rapid decline into that sort of addictions beginning in my late teens. And ending, believe it or not, just about 8 years later, that's how fast I spiraled downward. And through that event, of getting clean, getting sober, my spirituality began to slowly awaken. And, 12-step program, private counseling. And I was I've always my whole life been an avid reader. And I still am today. I kind of speed read. And I can go through a book, relatively quickly. Doesn't make me any better than anyone else, but I just absorb things like a sponge as far as the knowledge within them. So that was the first episode. The second was a very devastating fire that happened to me that I've written about in my previous books. And I was running a totally non-spiritual business, and overnight the place burned. And I was left essentially directionless as far as what do I do with my life? What now? And I remember, Christy, during that time, praying to God or spirit, which I call it, the source, right? And saying, can you just assign me a job? I was still single. This was in my early to mid 30s. And so I said, can you just come down here and assign me a job? Because I have no clue what direction I'm supposed to go in life. So I fumbled around. This was probably after this fire burned me out of the business for a good year. And then, and in one of my books, I have a section titled The Phone Call That Changed My Life. And that phone call was from a friend who is no longer with us, passed in a terrible car accident, but she was a catalyst in placing that phone call to me to come to a metaphysical center in the small town that I live near. And I resisted that for, I don't know, probably several more months. And then she called again and, knocking on the door of my soul. And so I put on a nice dress and I went to this center. And as soon as I stepped into the center, um, I felt, something akin to being at home, right? So they did hands on healing, a lot of hands on healing, spiritual healing, also Reiki, and talked a lot about psychic ability, intuition, and, spiritually themed topics. So I began to attend regularly, and that's where my growth really accelerated. I took every class they offered. And then I went to a place called Delphi. Delphi is near Atlanta, Georgia. And my growth just really accelerated there. It's very intensive. You're going to class, but starting with meditation in the morning, then you have a class, then you have a break, for lunch, and then you're back in class, then you have supper, then you're back in class till about 10 o'clock at night. So within a week, I could, and I write about this experience of coming to Delphi, not being able to do readings for people. When I left 1 week later, I could sit with a absolute stranger and relay things to them about themselves, that people that I had never met before. So that's kind of a synopsis of how I really got started in doing this. And it's been a life changing, as you probably imagine, um, series of events that have pulled me to the place where I'm at now.
Wow. So in 1 week, you were able to up your spidey senses so much that you were able to actually do readings confidently and accurately. What is Delphi? Is that a university for
It is
spirituality? I never heard of
exactly
that.
what you said. It is a
Oh,
university of spiritual studies. It's sort of in the tradition of the old mystery schools. So, and I'm
yeah,
referring to, like in ancient Egypt and so forth, which I,
yeah.
through my own years of exploration, know that I was present uh, in Egypt several times. A couple of those were not fun incarnations. They were actually very punishing. But you mentioned the word confidently, and that absolutely was not true in the beginning. And, I mean, it would be like, oh boy, I hope they don't think I've really lost my mind, telling them this or that. So there's this, and that's why I said that it takes many years to develop not only the attunement to the spirit world and to one's own primary spirit guide, which I've written a lot about as well, but also to develop a level of confidence in knowing that what I'm delivering as the conduit is the perceptions are accurate. And that's taken many years, many, many years.
In what way does this information present to you? I've interviewed several psychic mediums and people that have these six senses, and they all talk about the different ways in which they get their information. Is yours primarily visual? Is it, or how does this information get downloaded to you primarily?
Through clairsentience, which is sensing uh, with the inner that's in one of the inner senses. I'm sure some of your listeners have heard about the three clairs, clairaudience, clairvoyance, and clairsentience. So it's both emotion, say, of the spirit communicator, but it's more than that. It's a perception of, um, even clairvoyance, because clairvoyance and clairaudience arise from the faculty of clairsentience. And it took me a long time to understand that. However, through training, I've done a lot of training over the years. I mean, I've taken a lot of training as well as I've done a lot of teaching of mediumship and intuitive development for individuals. So, clairsentience is, for example, and I usually use this analogy because most people will get it, most people will understand. Say that I had a painting here, a piece of artwork, and it's covered by a cloth. And I say to you, as the person who's going to perceive this, tell me what you feel, what you perceive, what you sense when I remove this cloth. And then I remove it. And it's sort of that gut knowing of, oh, that makes me feel really happy. Or I sense, a lot of sadness in that. Or I sense that the artist who did this was, going through something in their life. And that's why they created this. And so it's sort of like that, in that it becomes then this canvas of this blending, if you will, of these inner perceptions, by the way, that we all have. I just happen to be an individual who was born with a sensitivity to it. You'll never hear me refer to myself as gifted. I believe that that allows ego to creep in because it sets one on a pedestal saying that I'm superior in some way, that God, spirit favored me. So I don't ever want ego to be a part of my work. We need the ego. It's been terribly demonized in, quote, New Age philosophy. It's not a bad thing. It is simply a part of the personality, and the personality is part of it. So it is just that we all have this. I happen to have developed it with an innate sensitivity. And
I've I've always been hoping that my innate sensitivity will rise through my spiritual journey, and I do feel like I am um very sensitive to people's energy, you know? I wouldn't say that I have any spidey gifts, or like that I can read somebody's mind or pick up on a lot of information, but I do think I am particularly somebody who's sensitive to other people's energy. It affects me. And I've been told that by many people in the past, but I'm always in the, let's develop that ability that I do believe we all have to some degree or another. I also think that some people are just born with a better ability. Maybe they've had more incarnations than other people. Maybe it's their path to be able to open up and explain to people beyond the veil. You just never know, you know? But in your book, you talk about how people can lean into that extrasensory perception that we all have, and how it can help guide you at every facet of your life. Um, you talk about three main intuitive senses that we all have. Can you tell us what they are and how we can be interpreting them better for our own soul's journey?
yeah, and by the way, I distinguish intuition, which as spiritual beings, as divine beings, we all have. Now, that can mean, we're driving to work and we get this gut feeling, maybe I shouldn't go down that particular road. And so we avoid it. And then later we find out, oh, there was a terrible accident down there. That is what I would call sort of the mainstream intuition. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, that serves us. It keeps us out of danger. a lot of problems come in when people don't follow that, when they go, wow, that I'm making that up, and they go down the road and then they come into the terrible accident. So, spiritual intuition is following and trusting the voice of our own soul. And intuition by itself is the voice of the soul. It is the internal navigation system, the internal compass. And I know others have described it that way. I think it is an accurate description of what intuition is. I go a step further in distinguishing that from why am I going through this particular challenge? Why am I going through this particular difficulty? And as you said in the beginning, um, currently, yes, we are very polarized. There's a tremendous amount of anger out there. And what is that telling us about ourselves? And how can we, importantly, make it better? So
I don't know anyone right now, hardly in my life, that isn't going through some sort of trauma, whether it be health related, financially, their job loss. Um, you know, I just feel like there is an immense amount of chaotic energy on our planet right now. Everybody seems to be going through something. And that is on top of what's happening globally in our political arena with the wars, with everything else. There is this also individual personal effect that it seems like everybody's going through something right now. I've never been on the planet where there it seems like there's been more trying times than now, don't you think?
I do, but upon reflection, I'm wondering if it's just that because of the immense ability for all of us to know things in a second through social media, through the internet, through television, if it's not just that we're much more aware of it. In the old days, people didn't have that. Humanity, I mean, things were spread through word of mouth. That might have taken months or years if it even got there to another continent or to a different area of the country. So I don't know. It could just be that we're much more aware of it. We're constantly inundated, as you know, with a plethora of information, and we have to shut it down a lot. In fact, I mean, things can cause a lot of trouble when we can't shut that down. We're constantly on social media. We're constantly looking at the phone, which takes us out of
Yeah.
presence, the present moment.
Yeah.
I am very dismayed at technology with that. Of course, there's always the positive side, just like with everything else. There's positive and negative. So, uh, yeah, I mean, it could just be that we're much more aware of things.
Yeah.
When I read history, the time I'm not particularly interested in world history or, the United States history. But I mean, just as we know, even on our own, the United States history, the polarization that occurred during the Civil War. So we had that dichotomy of, well, we're not going to let you take slavery away. And the other side going, it's morally wrong. And so we had this
Yeah.
polarization even then, but they did not have the modern technology that we have that creates, interestingly, my own experience, a lot of anger. I think I
Yeah.
only discovered that because my accounts were hacked on Facebook recently, like in the last month, and I haven't been able to get back on. And I noticed over those almost a month's time, how much clearer my mind is and how much less angry I've become and immersed in, the polarization. And I swear that they
Yeah.
embed something in a subliminal in those pages. I don't know. I could be
I,
wrong, but I've just done my own
you
experiments, my personal experiences with that.
I don't think people understand how vulnerable we are by what we put in front of our face. I mean, if what I don't care if it's a TV screen or a phone or a computer screen, I don't care. You have to be looking at things with a filter the whole time. You can't just let information go into your eyeballs and into your brain without putting some sort of I work in the film and TV industry. Believe me when I tell you, I know. I you have to ask, what is this trying to teach me? What is this trying to get me to think, feel, say, or believe? There's always an agenda. I don't care if it's a pizza commercial or it's a political person that you're listening to. If you're not actually psychologically understanding that whatever you're letting penetrate your eyeballs is going to affect you, you're going to get swept away and become angry or become scared, or that's the goal of many of the stuff that we watch out there, is to pump you full of fear, to pump you full of anger. And I think there's a reason for that. I think they want to keep us hopped up on anger and fear and disillusionment and feel desperate and feel um helpless, vulnerable. That's the
Yeah, and
goal, I
you're
think, in a
absolutely
lot of this.
correct. And in the art of sensing, I've written about fear. Um, it
Yeah.
is the number one uh, false emotion that souls come here to confront, to overcome, to
Yeah.
transcend. And,
Yeah.
I look at, in the art of sensing, I look at the transformation of the individual and how the transformation of the individual out of the fear-based state, and by following the voice of the soul through spiritual intuition,
Yes.
how that uh, gives birth to global transformation. And because it necessarily has to begin within each individual. And because we are not
Yeah.
separate, this is the great illusion that we are separate. I'm a distinct person from you, or from that guy over there, or from this nation. When the truth is, I mean, that's the perception of the ego, right? The ego is always seeing
Yep.
separation, division. That's part of its job, so to speak, to discriminate, so to speak. The soul sees and senses and knows an underlying unity.
Yeah. I think that my biggest probably evolution in my own spiritual journey, which I'm pretty new at. I've only been on this journey a few years now, but I think the one of the best things that's come out of it is my fear level has gone way down. And I'm not nearly as fearful about anything, whether it be, you know, what's happening globally or my own personal journey or whatever. I don't fear death anymore. I don't fear um I feel much more of an ability to control my own outcomes based on my own thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I am a co-creator of my life. I have some sort of control over what do I allow in my reality based on how I'm vibrating. What am I attracting? Who am I pulling into my energy field? All of those things are going to affect your exterior reality. And it's been one of the biggest gifts that I've had, is just not to be, I'm not scared anymore. And I look at things sort of from a spiritual perspective now, instead of being a part of what's happening. I kind of look above, like I'm 30,000 feet up, like looking down at humanity, like, ooh, this is interesting. Look at all this crazy stuff that's going on. And I'm not so much in it, if you know what I mean. I'm not like a part of it. I'm an observer. You even say it in your book, to become an observer of what's happening to you instead of being caught up in the emotional turmoil of whatever's happening in the moment, becoming more of an observer. And I definitely have started to check that box for
Well
sure. It's
stated.
been super
Well
helpful.
stated. Yes, you have become the observer. So, what does that really mean? And I write a lot about this in the art of
Yeah.
sensing. And really in my uh, book right before the wisdom from the spirit world, becoming the observer. For example, the analogy, let's say that it's a beautiful summer day out and we want to go out there and just lie on the grass and relax. So I go out there, I put my blanket down and I lie down and I look up at the clouds in the sky and I see them passing over and I notice them and I go, oh, look, there's beautiful clouds, or maybe rain clouds coming in with our negative thoughts or whatever's going on in the environment. Um, but I don't sort of lasso them and pull them down to me. I'm simply observing them as they pass by, as they pass overhead. And so that's really what observation means, is a pulling back of our thoughts, which the mind is always, always, always going to produce because that is what it is designed to do. I always kind of chuckle when people say, well, I can't meditate. And I say, why is that? And they say, because, thoughts come in. And I say to them, you will always have thoughts. So the idea is not to become empty. The idea is to notice the thoughts or to observe the thoughts and then refocus on the breath and sort of transcend them and just say, boy, I'm feeling really afraid right now, or I'm feeling really angry right now. And so by absorbing, by acknowledging, by accepting what is, that enables us to become more of the observer. The problems come in when we identify or take on the thought, I am angry. Anything that you say with that statement of truth, which is an affirmation, I am, and you can fill in any adjective there. It really amplifies that. So it's sort of, sending that out. You've probably heard that expression, every thought is a prayer, right? So we can have
Yeah.
negative or self-defeating thoughts, or we can have very positive thoughts. Now, in no way am I saying to be sort of like a Pollyanna where you go, well, you're in the midst of something very terrible and you go, oh, I'm really happy, I think the key to this is admission of it, acknowledgement of it, and then acceptance of it, but also pulling back and saying, these are the thoughts that my mind is having right now. I'm acknowledging them, but they don't limit or define me.
Yeah. Yep, 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 yep. What is the best way for people to respond and know what their own intuition, their own soul is trying to communicate with them, and things that are pop into your head from your ego mind that you can't really control? Everybody has that like monkey chatter in their brain. What is the best way for people to be able to develop their way to trust their own intuition, and that is the direction, or that is the what they should be responding to?
That's a great question. I do list some characteristics in the art of sensing of how to distinguish. And so if it's coming from my logical mind, my rational mind, my ego, my personality, because the personality is an extension, and it's temporary because when we die, we will not retain that personality. It's simply for the purposes of evolution. It will usually feel more restricted, small, comparatively. Um, that's probably the best way I know how to put it.
Yeah.
The spiritual intuition, the voice of the soul, will be subtle. Oh, and I forgot to mention with the ego, maybe will be booming. Like, you need to get back at that woman, or you need to get back at that guy, or revenge, those sorts of things, or the anger and the response that's coming then from the ego of self defensiveness. If it's self-defending, you can bet 99.99% of the time it's coming from the ego. If it is subtle, and we've all heard this expression, the still small voice, right? So it is subtle. And we have to sort of train ourselves to say, I need to pay attention to that whisper. And so that's one way, is recognizing the subtlety of it. And also that it is never a retaliating sort of voice. It's not mean. It's not arrogant. Um, it's not sad. It's
Yeah.
hopeful. It's inspiring. And
More, I would say maybe more of a wise, profound line of speaking to yourself,
yes,
more wiser, not petty, not,
yeah.
not, yeah,
So petty, I
I
always think of
that's,
petty as small, right? Constricted, restricted.
yes.
The soul does not operate in restriction. The soul operates in unlimited potential. And that's why there's a section of book called Surrender, right? So surrendering does not mean I give up. I'm a loser. I'm vulnerable, right? Surrendering means letting go of the ego's need to control and surrendering to the wisdom, as you were saying, it's wise, the wisdom of the soul, which a lot of times is not going to make sense to the rational mind, because the rational mind says that's just nonsense. It's BS. It's you're never going to get anywhere by doing that. But the soul has that innate wisdom of what is going to eliminate suffering and advance us spiritually. And that is quite the opposite of what the ego deems as what is necessary.
Yep, yep, yep. In your book, you talk about the seven natural laws of the universe: the law of vibration, law of relativity, law of cause and effect, laws of polarity. There's a law of gestation, a law of rhythm, a law of transmutation. Can we talk about some of these laws that you think would most be helpful to the average person out
Sure.
there to help them navigate their own journey?
Yes. And a lot of people do not know. They know about natural law, but they don't know the specifics of them. So let's start with the most common, the law of karma, the law of return, right? Whatever I create in my thoughts, in my words, in my actions will invariably return to me. Now, that can be good. It can be really bad. Or in some cases, it can just be neutral. So most people understand that. I wish everybody would understand it, because the society and the culture that we live in would be much more peaceful if people would understand, if I go and harm Christy, if let's say I rob you, I steal from you, who's going to suffer that? Well, maybe her initially, but it will come back to me.
Yep.
People need to understand there is no subversion or skirting natural law. Why? Because they are the laws of nature, or in other words, spirit's laws, which will always supersede, take precedence over man-made law. I
Yep.
laugh when I see these people. Over the years, I've seen many, many, many things in the metaphysical community and read many things, tons of books, studies, and all of this. And I kind of laugh when I see people and they're like, well, I'm not going to be subject to karma anymore. Really? Have you have you somehow found a way to get rid of natural law? Because if you haven't, you are still subject to karma. Karma simply meaning cause and effect. Very simple law.
Yep.
Every
Yep.
effect
Yep.
has
Yep.
a cause. Every fundamental cause will have an effect. Everything that you see in the physical world was first a thought. So what about nature?
Yes.
Well, it was the thought of spirit, the original creative source, what some people call source, God, spirit, the eternal one. So everything, natural law is always cause and effect.
You talk a little bit about the fact that we are in the middle of a spiritual awakening in the world. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, what you feel is coming for humanity when it comes to our spiritual awareness and what our destiny is with this grand awakening that we're coming upon in the new age of Aquarius that we're in?
It is the age of Aquarius, and I've written in the art of sensing. I'm extremely studied in astrology. I do not consider myself a professional astrologer. However, it is a valid tool to help people. Why? Because it's a map of the soul. The birth chart is a map or language of the soul. So, Pluto, the outermost planet in our solar system, has just shifted, several months ago into the sign of Aquarius out of Capricorn. Aquarius is associated with um, freedom, the unique individual, also groups of people, humanity as a whole. That's Aquarius. Also, Aquarius is very futuristic. It's looking towards the future. That's why we've seen almost like overnight the um, phenomena of AI
Yeah, the technology boom.
technology,
Yep.
but this is going to become much more pronounced because Pluto
Yep.
remains in a sign anywhere from 15 to 20 years. It's very slow moving. And because Pluto represents the evolutionary journey of humanity, and evolution is slow.
I mean, it's going to be an exciting time to be alive. You can look at it like two different things. I feel like we're in a time where our old systems are going to be breaking. I think we're going to see new systems come up and be birthed out of a lot of breaking of our old ways. And I do think there's going to be a lot of turmoil coming up for humanity in a lot of different ways. But I'm trying to not be fearful of any of the difficult times we're going to have to go through in order to get to the other side and um see the beauty in it. I think it's going to be the long game a little bit for right now. I think we're just in the beginning of this transition. We're just embarking on a lot of things that are going I think we're going to see a lot of gnarly things here coming up for humanity in the next few years, but I think on the other side of that, we are going to be a much more enlightened, a much more spiritually aware society. I'm just trying to hold on for the ride. What is your best advice for navigating these times that we're living in?
First, I would agree with you wholeheartedly that, and I love that word gnarly. Gnarliness, if there's such a word. Uh, I just invented it maybe, but it's useful in this conversation. Is a result of resistance. Resistance is caused by the denial of what is, and I would also say clinging to the old order that you mentioned, which happens to be Capricorn. Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, represents the status quo, the institutions of government, the old networks. banks, financial systems, governments. That's all ruled by Saturn or Capricorn. So now that we're in this age of Aquarius, there is this awakening that these old ways, yes, that they have to be, um, I would say, subject to Pluto's action, which is a purging. That's the action
Mm.
of Pluto. It purges. In fact, in the body, it's associated with the intestines, the bladder, the reproductive organs. It's also creative. So it's both, it's creative, but it's also destructive. So in order to give rise to that phoenix, that proverbial phoenix rising from the ashes, the old has to die. So how do we navigate these times? We navigate them more successfully by, and this was my inspiration for writing The Art of Sensing, to follow the internal navigating system of each individual's own soul. And then collectively, um, realizing we're part of the whole, we're not just other human beings, nature, animals, um, all being united as life being given by the creator. So by following one's internal guidance system, which we talked about, which is always on target of eliminating suffering, right? Eliminating uh, travails in life. That is how we can navigate more successfully. Now, am I naive enough to think that, we're all just overnight going to transform? No, but it's like that. One of my favorite Michael Jackson songs, The Man in the Mirror. I love Michael Jackson. In my opinion, there'll never be another Michael Jackson. He was so incredibly talented. But looking at yourself in that mirror and saying, what can I do? What is in my power to do? How can I change myself? And then that navigates outward, that
Yeah,
expands outward to the collective. And that's really
yeah.
Aquarius in its purest form. It's looking at the future and seeing what is going to be the betterment for humanity.
Yeah. Yep, yep, yep. I always like to say, if you want to change the world, I used to be filled with dread. I used to worry so much about, especially I'm a big animal lover. I'm very much an environmentalist. I care that we're destroying the forests, the animals. It would negatively impact my mental well-being all the time. And then when I got into spirituality and I started understanding that if you wanted to change the outside, you got to change the inside, and instead of me being filled with dread all the time, I now, when I'm like in a meditation, I now send Mother Earth love. I send the animals love. I exude love because I feel like that in itself is having a much greater impacting on the world and the global consciousness than me living in fear or sadness for the other species on this planet. And so I've kind of split, just that one little switch that I've done. Not only is it better for me, I'm not sad and filled with dread, but I do feel like I'm making a greater impact. You have to be able to change this inside, and then you're going to see it reflect on your in the exterior reality you're living in. I believe that, anyways. Um, going back to astrology in your book, you go through archetypes that everybody has, like the healer, the system buster, the you know, all of these different patterns of behavior that are deeply ingrained in the human consciousness that I think that you're pretty much born like that. Don't you think, astrology gave me the insight that we are much more coming into this world with our own set of pre-identified ways, biases, and innate uh, uh, predetermined ways of being. And it makes me judge people less because everybody has their own journey here. And I think that it's very easy to judge each other based on how we're behaving or how we respond to certain stimuli. But I always think back to the fact that you're kind of come down here with these attributes already. And I know a few of the ones that I identified with. I identified with the healer. I did identified with a system buster, and I identified with one more of those archetypes. But can you talk a little bit about the archetypes, what it means for humanity, and how we can fall into these various categories?
Yes. And I also have a section in there on soul pods. I think there's a whole chapter. What are
Yes,
soul
I was
pods?
gonna.
Well,
Yeah.
pod is simply another term for a group. I liked pod because when we think of, like the dolphins, they stick in that little group, they're swimming, and some of it's for protection. But with human beings, it's about these souls, these other souls, in our group that we usually travel from lifetime to lifetime with. Now, in that group, there is usually a common theme. We can call those archetypes deeply ingrained expressions of spirit in the human consciousness. And souls may spend multiple lifetimes working on or exhibiting or expressing one particular archetype. You mentioned, for example, the healer. I would put myself in that group, also the teachers. I invented that group of the system busters. Uh, I'm glad you brought them up because they are the people
Yeah.
who break up the old energy, which is necessary for us to evolve. So we need the
Yeah.
system busters. Um,
I mean, I feel I'm very much a system buster. Not only am I like an Aquarius to my core, like on every little something, like I'm an Aquarius and my every single house seems to be in like the Aquarius. Like I'm very much a independent thinker and
mhm.
I don't like tradition and I, don't mind breaking the rules. So like the system breaker, I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I can identify with that.
Yeah. And that can be done. I mean, the system buster can operate in different ways. It can be through
Yeah.
activism. We see a lot of this now. Not all of it is good. I think some of it is very uninformed, but really advocating for, in the true Aquarian way of the natural rights of the individual, or groups, uh,
Yeah.
by birthright, all living beings have the right to freedom. And just like our, Bill of Rights, our Constitution talks about the pursuit of happiness, the inherent right to be free and to follow our right to be happy. So, activism is good if it's done in the correct manner. So soul groups find one another sort of magnetically, just by the law of attraction, which is another natural law. The law of attraction, meaning like energy attracts like energy, and dissimilar energy repels. So, soul group members will automatically gravitate towards one another. And that is true here in the physical plane. It's also true in the afterlife. And example of that in my own, case files of mediumship readings. There are many, many people who I've done readings for who perhaps have lost somebody from an addiction. And, the reading goes on and I'll present a lot of evidence. And the soul who has made transition comes through and says, I'm with Uncle Harry. And my sitter, the recipient of the reading, will say, Uncle Harry had a problem with alcohol too. So this more recently departed soul is with this other like soul. And through that, relationship, they're helping one another, and they are helping one another to heal that and to balance that. So this affinity that we have just with our regular soul groups, they're not necessarily our biological family. They can be
Right.
friends, they can be employers, they can be people that we meet that we think is a coincidence, but it's really not a coincidence, that we are, drawn to on this higher soul level to this other individual for purposes of to help one another, to work on a project that's going to be beneficial for a group or for humanity at large. um, so that's really what soul groups are. And those themes or the archetypes will be evident. And it's sort of like what I suggest to people is, what are you naturally drawn to? What do
Mm.
you navigate towards without anybody telling you, without, any expectations? As you were saying, you resonate with the system buster, that this is how I am. This is my natural predisposition.
Yep.
So, and
It,
there's a purpose in that. People,
yeah.
the most common question in 30 years of doing readings is, what is my purpose? That is out of anything else. I mean, people come, I've done tons and tons of readings with connecting people with deceased loved ones, deceased pets. However, the most common question in life guidance readings is, what is my purpose? Why am I here? There's so many
Yeah.
people who do not know. And that's the other really important value of listening
Yeah.
to one's intuition. And I write a
It's
lot about that in this book, but my previous books as well.
It's so true. We all have a soul purpose. We all have things that we are supposed to come down here and learn, and we all have a reason when that is pre-planned, pre set up before we ever get down here to experience life on this 3D plane. Um Let me ask you this. Out of all the readings and all the information you've gleaned from Beyond the Veil, what are some of your greatest lessons from speaking to souls that have passed over, that you have found over the years that have just really touched you and allowed you to like learn more about the experience of humanity down here?
There are so many, but I would say, and these are, by the way, laid out in there are, I believe, 9 or 10 of them in Wisdom from the Spirit World, the previous book, the book right before this. And the number one is, there is no death. Life is eternal. The soul is eternal. Now, that may seem very mundane. That may seem that, yeah, okay, big deal. We all know that. We're going to go to heaven. But the comfort in knowing that to people, particularly people in grief, but not just them, anybody, that knowing, I am an eternal, unlimited being. I don't have to be so hard on myself. I came here to the schoolroom of earth to make mistakes. I'm going to hopefully learn from those mistakes so that I can continue to evolve. And there is an unfathomable love that streams from the spirit world to you, to me, to everybody. And the collaboration also between those in the spirit world, not only our spirit guides, those souls who help us on our pathway, but from our loved ones, our relatives, our pets, for gosh sakes. Um, the collaboration between them and us is truly astonishing. And we think that, oh, I had a thought, to go do this or to study that or to read that or to talk to this person, when really it's just collaborative efforts that's coming through inspiration. And again, through spiritual intuition. And why is it
Yeah.
spiritual? Because it's going to help us on our own unique individual journey. It's going to help us to evolve.
I completely agree. I have been working on really tapping into that aspect of who we are for a while now, and I do feel more um in touch with my spirit guides. I do feel like they're more present. I do get synchronicities now all of the time. Sometimes I'll have days where I'll literally look at the clock and it'll be 222, 333, 444. I'll be like, this is weird. Leave me alone. It'll just be weird, but I'll be like, it speaks to my level of being in touch with my higher self, if that makes
Yeah, yeah,
sense. That I'm
absolutely.
really,
Yes.
you know,
Numbers have vibration. And I have many, many, many clients who, okay, I feel like my son is around my deceased son. His birthday was this date, and I keep seeing those numbers, for example.
yeah,
Nature is a tool,
yeah,
a vehicle, if you will, that the spirit world uses a lot. The synchronicity, meaning meaningful coincidence, right? It's really not a coincidence. The definition of synchronicity is it creates meaning for the receiver of that. So it's two things happening at the same time. Oh, I'm thinking about my mother who died, 10 years ago. And then all of a sudden, or my dad, I see the cardinal pair coming in, or the male
yep,
cardinal. I have heard so many in my second book, I'm Still With You. There's a whole chapter on how spirit communicates without the use of a medium. And these are called after death communication. And that term was first coined in a book by Bill Guggenheim and Judy Guggenheim, and it's called Hello from Heaven. And he categorizes these. So, and I do credit him in the book. There's many, many different things because spirit, we become essential just after we leave the body, we become pure energy. Reminds me of Mr. Spock from Star Trek. I
yeah.
love Star Trek. Um, we become this pure form of energy. So that's my theory on how spirit can manipulate things like telephones. I've had people tell me that their printer spontaneously printed out hearts, from they received text on their cell phone, like the emojis of the smiling face, they knew it was from their daughter in spirit or whatever. So there's all of these amazing synchronistic ways that the spirit world can communicate. And, another, you asked about the different lessons. One that I'll mention quickly here too
Yeah,
is that we are not never separate from the spirit world. The spirit world is right here. It's around you right now. It's around me. It's much like a television or radio. You have to turn it on to hear it. So, you raise your antenna, you tune into it. It's not a place per se. It's a state of consciousness. And I feel it's very comforting for people to know not only do we not die, that we're going to be with that person that we're mourning. We're going to be with them
yep,
again. We've probably been with
yep,
them in previous incarnations. And so to me, it's very comforting for people to know they're not off somewhere. They're right here. And
yeah,
it's a matter
yep.
of knowing how to tune into that.
I love that. I mean, I definitely my father has passed and twice now I have been in states of severe just bad place and whether I'm having a crying fit or something twice now I left my dad's phone number in my phone. He's still in my favorites, so I see him when I go into the rest of my contacts. He's there. Twice now, I've that number has called me and I pick it up and nothing's there
I
twice.
love
Twice
that.
when I've been really dark, I and I like, I know he's there.
That's very
So,
touching, very touching. Yeah, that would be another example of, people say, I have my son's phone here, he died 3 years ago. And all of a sudden the phone rang and it hasn't been activated for X amount. So, I mean, the
yeah.
things I have heard from people, I am so blessed. I'm so grateful to be doing the
Yeah.
work that I'm doing, and I absolutely love it. I love that your father gave you that and saying, "Hey, I'm right here. I
I'm
know what
here.
you're going through." And Christy, that's another lesson that I've absorbed from doing this work of being a medium is that spirit knows when we're sad, when we're ill, when we're going through a rough time. They know that. And they can't interfere because we have our own lessons. And they know that too, that they can't interfere. But just like your father did, they'll say, it's going to be okay. And I sense with your dad, he was saying, I'm right here. It's going to be okay. We
Yeah.
always think of a father as, sort of that paternal protective energy, from the time we're young. And I find that there often a father will play that role even after death. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely he has for sure. And I know now that I'm in this world and, I came out of atheism, I'm only just getting into my spiritual journey the last few years. Like, I know I'm going to see him again. Like, it's not that I'm looking forward to death, but I no longer fear it. And I know I'm going to see people that I love, and I'm not excited. Like, that's not the word. I'm not excited to die, but I feel I don't know what the word is. It's not anticipation. I'm just not fearful to die. I know that I'm going to continue to exist in another consciousness, not on this 3D plane, and I'm probably going to come back here and learn other lessons on this ball of blue that we call Earth. And I I think one of the most magical things that I've learned in my journey is that life really truly is so much more magical than we think it is. There's so much more going on than we're exposed to and that we acknowledge. And when I started to tune in and listen, you really start being able to pick up on that energy that is surrounding us. And you'll definitely get signs, you'll definitely get synchronicities if you start tuning into that part of who you are, which none of us really tune into it. We're all so distracted all the time with whatever else we got going on, whether it be our work, our phone, or whatever. Um, Last question. What do you hope people will learn most from reading your book, The Art of Sensing?
Who they truly are beyond what you just said, the personality, the busyness of life. I noticed, I've observed that people today, they're constantly busy, 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 busy. That's a choice. That's a choice to be that busy that, oh, I don't have time to meet a friend for lunch, or I don't have time to, do something with my child, or whatever it might be that, is really of value, our relationships. Um, to really know the self in its truest, most fundamental form beyond the personality, beyond this mind that thinks all sorts of thoughts, and to work with that self to transcend suffering. Who doesn't want to eliminate more unhappiness or suffering in their life? I mean, suffering comes in many forms. It can take many, many different forms. Even when we're angry, that to me is a form of suffering because I know when I've gotten angry, I can even feel like my blood pressure going up and, these muscles in my neck tightening. So the body doesn't like it either. Um, but to be able to have those states, still be human, but to recognize that that is not who I truly am. And that's sort of the overarching theme. And the reason I use the word difficulties, of transcending those is by tuning into that. We're probably still going to have difficulties. That's the nature of the physical plane. It's a plane of
Mhm.
duality. However, we can make those less and we can grow from them and learn about ourselves from those difficulties.
I think more and more people are starting to understand that we are much more powerful beings than what we're given credit for. I think that we don't know our whole true history of how we got here and how we became what we are. And I think that people are starting to distrust more and more institutions, for better or for worse, but they are looking to answer these bigger life questions like, who am I? What am I doing here? What are we doing here? What is the meaning of all this? And I think you're going to see more and more and more people get on this investigation train of figuring out what and who we are as humanity. I think it's just an untapped question that I think most people are diving into, and we're going to see more and more of it out there, I think. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this show, is to kind of raise the raise the vibration of this planet and get people interested into asking those questions. What's your sole purpose? What are you doing here? It's not, I don't think we were meant to get born, get programmed in school, work a job we hate for 30 years, and, pay bills till we die. I think there's a much bigger story here about humanity that needs to be told. And I think we're just now starting to really get into it.
You're absolutely correct. And I believe that most people walk around and think, I am this body, I am my personality, I am this, I am that. And they completely neglect who they truly are. And discovering that is, yes, the asking questions. A long time ago, and we can end on this if you'd like. A long time ago, I said to my spirit guide, I have these internal dialogues with my spirit guides. Sometimes they answer, sometimes they laugh, sometimes they are silent. And I said, but I want this answer. I need to know this. You know what they said to me? Rest in the unknowing. And my response was one
Interesting.
of anger. And I said, thanks a lot, very, very
Right.
critically. And so, but what I discovered, there are certain things that spirit guides cannot reveal because it would very much disrupt the evolutionary journey of the soul's natural unfolding organically. That's why they will not answer certain questions. And I remember another thing they told me, and it was this: if we told you everything now, and this was many years ago in the early part of my journey of mediumship, you would be very overwhelmed. And I thought, no, I wouldn't. I would be happy to know that they were 100% spot on with that of not telling me back then. And I would have been very overwhelmed because would I have imagined that I would have written these books, that I would be sitting here talking to you or anyone else? No, especially through a computer, because back in the
Right.
day, I mean, there wasn't the virtual platforms and everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a wisdom. It's trust. We didn't talk a lot about that, but I'll briefly just mention it now. That
Yes. Yes.
trust is
Please do.
essential. And that's part of surrender. That's part of surrendering, is trusting that if I fall backwards, you're not going to let me fall. You've got my back. And that, I would say, you, meaning you with a capital Y, spirit, has our
Yeah.
backs. Now that
I will.
requires trust on our behalf.
Yeah. Or you could call it faith. I mean, faith is
Mhm.
not something that I leaned into most of my life. The word faith left a bad taste in my mouth because we didn't get into my story, but like I grew up kind of in a hellfire, brimstone, religious, overbearing world, and faith was used in a lot of ways, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. But when I started coming into spirituality and opening up to who I really am, the nature of what we are, who we are, the word faith has kind of risen back up in my vocabulary to mean just that. Have faith that you are exactly where you are because you're supposed to be that way. You are being divinely guided at every point in your journey, and to have trust and faith that you are learning the lessons and doing the things that you're supposed to be doing here on this particular go round on this planet. So faith is something that I've had health issues for a lot of years, and I've started to lean heavily into faith that I'm going to get through it, that things are going to resolve, that I'm divinely guided, that this is something that was supposed to happen to me. For whatever reason, whatever. Everybody's got traumas they got to go through in their life, and I guess this is a lesson that I'm supposed to be learning in this journey, and I have faith that this was supposed to happen to me, and it's going to be of some benefit for me and my spiritual growth and development. And that's trust and faith that the
Yes.
universal laws are working on 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 my behalf for my highest and greatest good, you know, and that it's all
Well
going to be
stated.
okay. Well, Carol, thank you so much for coming on. And I love talking to people that have the ability to lift the veil and give a perspective to people based on knowledge that is not known to most. You have been able to tap in to a side of us that most people only can dream of. So I'm gonna look up the Delphi school. Maybe I can like get some spidey senses if I go there.
I could see you going there. No, Delphi,
Really?
yes, Delphi calls to certain people. I tell you, it's not for everyone. And it's very intensive. Be prepared to come out a different person than when you went in. And the groups are small. I mean, that they do now. I haven't been there in many, many years. I went there in the 90s. So, but I will tell you that it accelerates you to the point where, your inner senses, intuition, psychic ability, your healing abilities very rapidly opened.
It's interesting. The other day, I had because, I meet so many people, some of them are like, I'd love to give you a reading. And I always say yes because I'm like, yeah, I'd always get a reading. But one of them, my reading that I had just last week said, you should think about going into the occult. And I go, the occult? He goes, that just means the unknown, the hidden knowledge. He goes, I go, it's weird because I do get pulled in this like um doing sigils or doing some sort of like ceremonial stuff, with words and stones and whatever. I said, but I never do it because it always I'm always a little hesitant about the darker side of that magic, if you will. And I do kind of believe that there is magic. I think magic works, and I think the reason it works is because of our own intention, our power, the power of our own belief system will has a lot to do whether or not something is going to work for you. But anyways, it's interesting that you say I could see you going there because I'm like, I'm getting pulled in this like I wouldn't call it a witch, but like a I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know. Leaning into the occult, I guess. I don't know, but in a good way, if that makes sense. Like I don't want to be a bad witch. I want to be something for higher higher
You want
reasons,
to be Glenda.
I don't know. Glinda. Exactly.
You want to be
Exactly.
Glenda,
Exactly.
not the one that's underneath the house when her feet
That's right.
curl up.
That's right. I want to be a force of good. That's right.
Thank
That's
you
right.
so much for
Um,
having me, Christy.
Thank you so much, man. Anytime you're writing a new book, you want to come back and have another spiritual discussion, you have a spot here on this
Thank you.
show. You're a light Keep doing what you're doing. I can't thank you enough for you spending your time today on the Fate podcast. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week on Fate from Atheism to Enlightenment. Thank you, Carole, for coming on board today. And journey well, everyone. Bye bye. And that is a wrap on this episode of Fate from Atheism to Enlightenment. I want to thank Carole for coming on the show today and spending her time with me. She will be back, folks. She is a wealth of information, and I'd love to have her back on the show anytime to discuss any kind of spiritual topic she chooses. So we'll be looking forward to that. Pick up her book, The Art of Sensing, a guide for staying true to your soul's journey through challenging times. We're all going through something, it feels like right now, guys. And being able to kind of lean in to your internal intuition for any kind of guidance is super important. I'm trying to do it myself these days. I'm trying to listen to my own inner higher self. Um, Realize when I'm being pulled in one direction or another, paying attention to my energy and how it's feeling when I'm doing something or when I'm interacting with someone or when I'm watching something. And just being more in tuned in with your body, how it's feeling, I think is really important for navigating any kind of traumatic experience. I'm not saying you're not going to cry. I'm not saying you're not going to have hard days. I I've been swimming in all the spirituality things, and the tools have really helped me in so many ways. But I'm still a novice, and I'm still learning, and I still have very bad days where I can't seem to vibrate my way out of how I'm feeling, no matter what. Even knowing that it's not bringing anything good to my reality or it's not going to pull in what I need by feeling that way. Sometimes you have to go through the feelings, purge yourself of them, and then be able to realign to vibrate with something like gratitude or joy or creativity or love. But we're going to see some interesting things coming up ahead between moving into this new age of Aquarius and all of the disruption and we're going to see the breaking of our systems, of our institutions. I think we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it in America with this new administration, and changes are happening at a rate that the average person can't even seem to keep up with. Um, I'm not trying to pay too much attention to it, and I know that seems maybe not appropriate to say, but I'm just looking at it from a different lens. I'm looking at it from more of a spiritual lens and a political lens. And although I see it, I acknowledge it, I'm not spending my time every day concerned, worried, or focusing on it. What you focus on grows. So I use that frame of reference for many things, whether I'm referring to if I'm having symptoms that day or if something bad has happened out there in the media landscape or whatever. I try to focus on what is only going to be of my highest and greatest good. Acknowledge that over there. I see it. I got you. But I'm not going to focus on something that is not going to be making me feel that I am in the best um, timeline that I can possibly be. So that's what I do. I try and focus on things that I can feel good about and that resonate with me in a way that allows me to continue to move more confidently in the direction that I want to go. So if you're out there and you are finding yourself experiencing a level of trauma, whether it be personal trauma or the immense amount of unknowns that is happening within the economy, within our political discourse, within our government, whatever your trauma is that you're experiencing, there's plenty of it to go around, it seems, these days. I mean, I personally don't think we're ever going back to normal. I don't know what the new normal is, but I do know that we're never going back to the days that felt normal to me, which was it doesn't feel normal that we have all this political discourse. It doesn't feel normal that we have so much hatred. It doesn't feel normal that everyone seems to be uh, in their own camps and not listening to one another and hating each other and how our leaders interact with each other, what the media, I mean, there's just so much that is weird about how we live now and foreign to me. And I long for the days where I felt like there was a lot more unity and that we were moving towards a more evolved society and that we were going to do the right thing. I don't feel like we're going to do the right thing anymore. I feel like we're going to do some pretty stupid shit. I do. I don't feel intelligence is reigning these days. I feel it's selfishness, greed, power, and it's going to go and lead us to some pretty dark days. I hate to say that, man. I hate to say that, but I do. I think it's true. And I know it's spiritual. I know it's energetic. I know that there's grander things going on in our world than what we might think. You know, these crazy wars or the fact that no one can agree on truth. It's even bigger than that. There's even bigger spiritual stuff happening that relates and explains why all this other what I would be calling smaller stuff is happening. It's why they say there's so many souls on earth. Everybody has reincarnated to witness the rise of human consciousness, the evolution of our spiritual awareness. It's happening. And part of the chaos that is happening is due to this awakening. So it's a very interesting time to be alive. And I'm really trying to look at it like it's exciting and it's not something to be fearful of. Like, I don't know what being scared really buys me. It doesn't buy anybody anything. There's nothing to be scared of. There's not. But I think you have to be aware. You have to be alert. You have to lean into your intuition, into your inner guidance, into your higher self. Get that clarity. Get on your soul's path. There is no better time than to stop this 3D matrix way of thinking and start understanding that we are spiritual beings having a human experience on a 3D interdimensional plane. There's no better time than to get on that train than now. Now is the time to broaden your horizons, expand your perspective, and understand that there is just so much more going on than what we were pre programmed here to believe. And this idea that we're, supposed to be slaves to a job and die of some sort of cancer or dementia, which is like, I feel like we're cattle sometimes. We just like, we're in this like cog of, and unless you're super wealthy, living among us like a fucking god, you really are a cog in a wheel and you are subjugated to the whim of the powerful. And it's best to awaken from that nightmare. as quickly as possible and step into your own power. Take your own power back. Understand that you are a creator of your own uh, experience here based on what you think, what you feel, what you say, you're speaking, you're spelling, you're manifesting. It's real. And awaken to who you are. And doing so, lean into that intuition, lean into your inner guidance. It is never going to steer you wrong, ever. It's there for a purpose, a reason, and you should learn how to tap into that energy. Everyone has it. And I'm learning to try and tap into it myself. Anything that I say on this podcast, I'm also doing. You know, I'm not out there um, saying something and then not taking my own advice. Like, I'm trying to sit and tap into the energy in my body to live in this present moment where I feel like it is the most, we find our most powerful selves is in the present moment. That's all we really have, anyways. And really, ask for signs. I ask for guidance all the time now. I get synchronicities like you wouldn't believe. I do spend time in silence, though. I'm not on social media a lot. I'll go days without opening, watching my television. I'll turn it on a little to get the weather and maybe some local news, but I'm not hanging on every politician's word out there and involved in this, election or whatever, or being so focused on that. That is not where my focus lies. My focus lies on um, seeking my own higher self, getting on my own spiritual journey, and not getting wrapped up in the 3D problems that they want you to be distracted with. Because personally, I think all of it's a distraction, all of it. So I, my advice to you is to, you know, it's never too late to step into your spiritual awakening, to understand who you are, to get on your path. Listen to some more podcasts, read some more books, go to a spiritualist church, open your mind. You know, don't be so fearful of expanding yourself. And even if it can be uncomfortable, lots of people have these fears and they don't feel comfortable when they're either getting new information or they're experiencing something different. You got to start tackling those fears, lean into your fears. Part of the reason why we're here is to learn how to navigate emotions and understand what they are and how they work, and not being a victim of your emotions, but being able to be more of an observer of your emotions. Try to understand what they're trying to tell you, teach you, and then lean into your intuition, into your inner knowing, and try and glean a little bit of insight from your higher self, your guides. They're with you for sure. There's no doubt. All right. So with that, gang, I'm going to leave it there. You want to follow me? I'm on Instagram at F.A.T.E. podcast. So follow me on Instagram. Make me feel good. I don't have that many followers, which isn't shocking. I don't spend that much time on there, but I am definitely looking for your support. I would definitely love any feedback you have. And I want to keep doing this as long as I can. So tell a friend, share, like, subscribe, turn someone onto the show. I am trying to raise the consciousness of this planet here, gang, and I need your help because Lord knows I'm not going to be able to manage my social media stuff. I need a social media manager. That's what I need. Is anybody out there working cheap these days? Alrighty, gang. We'll see you next week on Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. And welcome to your fate, everyone. I'll see you next week. Journey well.